The highway was empty. I had the windows cracked just enough to let in the damp night air, the cold pooling low where the car met the asphalt. The rumble of distant traffic above the overpass felt muffled, almost unreal, like sound slowed down somewhere between here and there. I hated driving alone at night, but the shortcut seemed faster. The GPS promised 10 minutes saved, but something in the back of my mind reminded me that shortcuts had a way of delivering unexpected lessons. I slowed as I approached the shadow of the overpass. The streetlights above cast long, skeletal stripes across the road, and beneath the bridge the blackness pooled like ink, swallowing everything beyond the headlights. My headlights swept the concrete supports automatically, searching for stray debris or lost tires. That's when I saw it. 2 amber pinpoints glowing in the darkness beneath the structure. I blinked, assuming instinctively that it was an animal. Maybe a dog, a raccoon, but something about the way the eyes held their gaze made me freeze. They weren't moving, not circling, not pacing, just watching, deliberate, intelligent. My pulse spiked, my grip on the steering wheel tightening. The overpass was quiet beneath its thunderous exterior. Water dripped somewhere above, hitting puddles and splashing in hollow rhythm. Gravel shifted in slow slides as the wind nudged it. The blackness seemed unnaturally still, almost waiting, and I realized the eyes were set too high for any animal I'd ever seen. Too large, too patient, too aware. I eased the car to a stop, telling myself I just needed a better look. A rational voice in my head reminded me of what my friend had said weeks ago. Don't ever stop under that overpass at night. It's not a good place. I had laughed it off then, thinking she was being melodramatic. The laugh died in my throat now as I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking. The eyes blinked, not slowly, not lazily, a sharp shudder, deliberate. When I moved my gaze back to where they had been, they were gone. I felt my chest tighten. The faint sound of footsteps, or was it echoes, reverberated across the concrete. Forward, behind, left, right. None matched the physical layout of the overpass. Each step sounded impossible, as if whatever was under the bridge did not respect the laws of space I knew. I turned the phone's flashlight on, sweeping it across the nearest pillars, the puddles, the scattered litter. The beam revealed nothing but shadowed concrete. And then the eyes, not where they had been, not perched low or across the span of gravel. They were high now, somewhere along the shadowed ridge above the concrete wall. Blinked, gone. Blinked again. Lower, to the side, a space I couldn't have imagined them occupying. Each reappearance contradicted physics, logic, everything I understood about presence and movement. I forced myself to breathe slowly. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. I dared not open the car door. The wind whispered through the broken edges of the bridge, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and rust. The sound of water dripping multiplied, echoing from angles that made no sense. Gravel shifted somewhere to my left, soft scrapes like someone or something was walking in place. No animal walked like that. The intelligence behind the eyes was impossible to deny. They waited, patiently, as if my hesitation, my very noticing, was part of their plan. And then, impossibly, I realized. The eyes weren't across the space. They were aligned with my car, with my line of sight, as if the shadows themselves had reached out to track me. Not watching from the darkness, they were waiting for me to step closer. I tried to convince myself to leave, to drive forward, but the headlights were swallowed by the underpass almost immediately, the light flaring uselessly across the wet concrete. Any illumination made the darkness deeper, more tangible, as if revealing it gave it shape and intent. I flicked the phone, trying to pierce the black, but the glare seemed to animate the space beneath the bridge, throwing impossible angles and reflections that weren't there before. The eyes blinked again, closer, at the edge of the phone's beam, then vanished. Movement in the corner of my vision made me swing the flashlight, revealing only empty space, yet I could hear it. A soft shuffle, a deliberate scraping along the concrete where no one could possibly stand. Another step echoing from above, then behind. The overpass was a puzzle of impossible echoes and shadowed intelligence. Every instinct screamed at me that the thing beneath the bridge was not an animal, not human, and certainly not mindless. I remembered my friend's warning again. The laugh I had shared in response seemed like a memory from someone else's life. "It's waiting," I whispered under my breath, feeling the word hang in the cold air. My own voice startled me, bouncing against the pillars in warped echoes, as if whatever was watching me recognized sound, recognized intent. I didn't move. My foot hovered over the accelerator, my hand over the gearshift, but I couldn't bring myself to drive forward. Every instinct urged me to stay, to look, to test the patience of whatever waited beneath the underpass. And I understood with a cold, creeping certainty that this patience was deliberate, calculated, infinite. Minutes or hours, I couldn't tell, passed. The rain had started, soft, ghosting over the windshield, blurring the edges of my headlights. The eyes were there again, somewhere in the darkness beyond the reach of light, patient and intelligent, not watching me from a distance, waiting, calculating the moment I might step closer. I realized that nothing in this place was normal, that the overpass itself had become a living chamber of suspended time, governed by something beyond my understanding. And as I sat there, the rain tapping against metal and asphalt, I knew I could leave or I could stay, but the eyes would follow either choice, patient, deliberate, aware. I turned off the phone. The beam vanished, taking with it the last barrier of illusion I had maintained between myself and the darkness. The highway beyond hummed quietly, uncaring, and beneath the overpass, the darkness waited. For a long moment, I thought I could leave. Then the eyes reappeared, aligned not across the concrete, not along any wall or pillar, but somewhere impossibly close. Waiting, not watching, waiting. And I understood the terrible truth. The underpass wasn't a place to pass through at night. It was a place that wanted something from those who dared to notice. I never stepped closer. I never dared. But I knew I was already within it. And I knew, with a clarity that made my chest ache, that the eyes were not watching me from the darkness. They were waiting for me to step into them. The road ahead ended abruptly, but my car kept driving forward anyway. I didn't notice at first. The highway had been empty for miles, gray ribbons of asphalt stretching beneath the dull glow of the streetlights, the surrounding forest folding into darkness. I had been driving for longer than I could remember, long enough for the radio to cut out, leaving only the hum of the engine and the quiet vibration of the tires as they hummed over the cracked surface. The air smelled of wet pine and asphalt, the damp cold pressing against the windows. The edge hit me like a slow, creeping shock. One moment the road bent gently through the trees, the next it simply stopped. The asphalt ended in a clean, flat line, a jagged lip hovering over darkness that seemed to devour everything beyond the headlights. I slammed my foot onto the brake and twisted the wheel, but the pedals felt wrong, soft, almost pliant. The car ignored me. For a heartbeat, I thought it was a malfunction, something mechanical. Worn brakes, a misaligned steering column. But the engine didn't stutter. The tires made no scrubbing sound against the air as we rolled over the invisible edge. We simply moved forward, as if the asphalt itself had extended into something unseeable, something that shouldn't exist. I blinked, trying to orient myself. The road was gone. A void had opened beneath the tires. The headlights reflected off nothing, and yet the car continued to glide forward with an insistence that felt deliberate. My fingers gripped the steering wheel until the knuckles ached, but even as I turned, nothing changed. There were no barriers, no guardrails, no bottom to this sudden chasm. Only the quiet, vibrating hum of the car's engine, and my own shallow breaths echoing inside the cabin. A warning came back to me, distant and brittle as dry leaves. My father's voice years ago. He had always driven these roads with a wary reverence, muttering about the stretch that doesn't stop. I had laughed then, young and impatient, imagining some obscure legend for old men. Now I felt his caution like a living thing pressing down on my chest. I peered into the darkness beyond the edge. For a second, the headlights picked out a shape, something vertical, impossible. A structure or a tree, but taller than any tree, rising from the void like it had grown upside down, roots hidden somewhere unreachable. The silhouette was sharp against the black, absurdly still. The car rolled toward it with the quiet inevitability of a glacier, and my stomach flipped. My voice came out in a whisper I barely recognized. No, no. The tires hummed differently now. Not a louder hum, but a subtle anomaly. It was as if the sound carried a weight, vibrating through the body of the car and into my own bones. The speedometer needle flickered between impossible numbers, darting from 0 to 60 and back again with no relation to the motion I could sense. The engine ran smoothly, steadily, consuming nothing. It was as though the laws I had relied on, gravity, momentum, friction, had been rewritten around the vehicle. I tried the handbrake. Nothing. I tried shifting gears. Nothing. The car had ceased to obey me. And in that moment, clarity arrived, cold and undeniable. I was not moving the car. It was carrying me. The void ahead was not empty. Fog drifted upward from the darkness, curling around the edges of the headlights in thick, unnatural ribbons. It carried the faint smell of salt and burnt rubber, something that had no place in this forested highway. Shapes twisted within it. The faint impression of a bridge bending in impossible angles, a building defying perspective, the faint glint of a figure standing perfectly still as we glided past. Every time I blinked, it seemed to rearrange itself. Nothing stayed where it should. I thought of the locals I had met at the diner 2 towns back, old men with wiry smiles and haunted eyes, whispering of travelers who vanished along this road. "It takes you where you shouldn't go," they had said, one thumb tracing the air in an arc as if marking a destination beyond reality itself. At the time, it was gossip, comforting in its distance. Now it felt like instruction. The road wasn't ending, it was folding into somewhere else. The vibration of the tires shifted again, the hum of the engine modulating into a rhythm that almost resembled footsteps. No sound came from the air around the car. No wind, no birds, nothing. Just that vibration, precise and eternal, pressing against my skull. And the void, always the void, expanding, waiting, stretching into forms I couldn't name or imagine. I tried to open the window. My fingers met resistance, as if the glass had become denser, heavier. The world outside was too vast to see, too deep to measure. The air itself seemed to shimmer. A low fog moved across the hood, curling into shapes that mimicked the trees and telephone poles that should have been there, but warped impossible. For a long second, I thought I glimpsed a road ahead, white lines, guardrails, a familiar curve, but as the headlights swept over it, the illusion dissolved. Nothing existed but the void and the car, gliding forward with patient certainty. A sensation spread through me, vertigo, but not the kind rooted in fear of falling. It was spatial vertigo, the kind that arrives when the brain notices that the rules it relies on, physics, gravity, continuity, no longer apply. I realized that the void itself might not be empty, only rearranged, folded in on itself like a map of a place that refuses to be mapped. And the car, obedient or unwilling, followed the contours of that impossible geography. I tried to speak, to call for help. My voice felt alien, swallowed before it left my throat. The dashboard lights pulsed faintly, responding to nothing I did. My reflection in the rearview mirror, my own face, pale and tight, looked back at me with an expression that wasn't entirely mine, eyes widening in synchronization with mine, as if recognizing the same inevitability. The edge of the road disappeared behind me. The hum beneath the tires was all that confirmed motion, yet the sense of space around the car was fluid, constantly stretching and compressing. Trees that should have receded remained fixed in the same place. Shadows bent in directions that should have been impossible. I tried to close my eyes, to shut the world out, but I could feel the movement still forward, somewhere no human map could chart. And then, without warning or climax, the car slowed, not to a stop, not because I commanded it, but because the void itself seemed to pull taut, folding the momentum into a space I could not name. The fog thickened, but the impossible shapes solidified. A road ahead that could not exist, lined with objects and structures I knew should be centuries out of place. Yet they were here, aligned with the car as though we had been summoned to meet them. I exhaled slowly. My hands loosened on the wheel, but the car did not. It had never been mine to control, and I realized, with a creeping understanding, that perhaps the road had never ended at all. Perhaps reality had. The headlights revealed a final glimpse of something that should not have been. A bridge of concrete and steel, suspended impossibly in the fog, curving into nothing. I could see the reflection of myself in the windshield, staring into my own eyes, and then the curve widened, opening into a space where the laws I knew no longer mattered. The car glided forward, and I understood that it would continue. Somewhere between places into the impossible, where control was irrelevant, and the world obeyed rules I could not comprehend. My voice caught, unsent, my hands on a wheel that no longer belonged to me. I was moving, carried, guided, and yet stationary, the road's end a threshold I had never crossed intentionally. And somewhere in the folds of fog and asphalt, I realized, perhaps I had never been driving at all.